So Naked Wines is one of the original wine D2C companies. We were founded over 15 years ago with the insight that wine just wasn't working for either the people who love wine or the people who make it. And so we exist now with over 500,000 subscribers because people want a better way to drink wine. They don't want to go to the supermarket and to scan the shelves.
Do you think millennials are struggling to find their place in the society right now? They are not there yet, like Gen Xers.
They're actually now the biggest consumers of wine of any customer demographic. It's all about getting liquid on lips. That's what the wine industry is about, right? It's about how you get people to try it.
They are independent providers of attribution services. Companies like Nielsen has a media measurement service, some of these companies. How useful are these?
It also makes things in search browsers quite hard to navigate. Sometimes you get blocked for the wrong reasons.
Hi, this is Shubham Tiwari.
Hi, this is Akhil.
Today on ShelfLife, we are joined by Lisa McDowell, Chief Growth Officer at Naked Wines. Lisa has spent her career at the intersection of brands, insights, and growth across companies like Deliveroo, Ocado, and now Naked Wines. From building customer insights systems to leading brand growth functions, she's consistently worked in environments where data, creativity, and commercial pressure all collide. At Naked Wines, she's helping steer the business through a critical phase, moving away from a document-led agency towards a more intentional customer-first model, while navigating the realities of a subscription-driven, direct-to-consumer wine business. Lisa, welcome to ShelfLife.
Thanks for having me.
If I remember correctly, one of the episodes of Shark Tank featured, another wine company, and they also had a subscription-driven model. And Kevin O'Leary was, a bit apprehensive of that. So how does this system work, the subscription-based model? Can you give us an insight on that?
Sure. So Naked Wines is one of the original wine D2C companies. So we were founded over 15 years ago with the insight that wine just wasn't working for either the people who love wine or the people who make it. And so we exist now with over 500,000 subscribers because people want a better way to drink wine. They don't want to go to the supermarket and to scan the shelves. They don't want to get ripped off by paying too much for something that they don't believe in or doesn't have a story behind it. And so each month, our members, we call them angels because we consider them our angel investors and our winemakers angel investors. They give us their money and we store it like a wine piggy bank almost. And that allows us to give forward commitments to some of the best winemakers in the world. Forward commitments in the world of grapes really matters because it helps you plan how you're going to manage your vineyard. It helps you understand how to find the best fruit and then how to turn that into wine. And so we are one of the original community companies that when customers sign up, they, yes, give us their money, but they also give us their time and their insight. So they help us craft and curate the range that we have, the winemakers we have, where we sell wine from. And we've tried to move away from that model over the years and nothing has stuck. The original model from 15 years ago is the absolute right fit for the kind of customers we want, who are the kind of customers who love to drink wine, but they also want to know the story behind it.
Nice. I was about to come to that picture behind you. Is that your orchard or it's a, general picture?
That's one of our vineyards.
Wow. Amazing.
Lisa, you said the traditional wine model is not working. People don't like to go to supermarket and just pick any wine. They want a story behind it. They want who are the people working behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us who is this audience? Because there's an audience, there's a customer segment that goes and buys from supermarket, and there's this customer segment that buys from Naked Wines. What does this difference in customer segments look like?
So we've done lots of audience work in the last couple of years to really understand this. And we think about it on a couple of levels, but we start with thinking about it on a psychographic level. So what are the character traits and personality types and people whose attitudes will fit really well to the kind of model that we have? And those people are typically really curious, they're independently minded, and they want to support the little guy. They don't want to vote with their money and give their money to the big supermarkets or to the huge agro-wine industries who make something to a recipe and where their soul has been eroded over time. So our customers typically are really food-centric. they're typically really interested in the story behind something. So why does an Oregon Pinot Noir taste different to a French Pinot Noir? And what is it about Scott Kelly in Oregon and how he makes wine that allows them to believe, and when they're opening a nice bottle at the end of the week, that they have got a story to tell about it when they're sharing it with a friend. And so we look for that psychographic alignment before we look for demographic alignment. But then on the demographics, which matter, right? We've got to make sure that we are appealing to a customer with the right income levels who wants to pay a little bit more, but for something that's much better quality. We know that we're looking for a classic upper middle income consumer. And this is true of all of our customers from all three countries that we operate in. We operate in the UK, the US, and Australia. Those customers are urban. They've got kids in the household. They're entertaining. They're having people over for like TV dinners, or TV dinners sounded wrong, didn't it? I didn't mean like, we call it microwave meals in the UK. I mean like entertaining friends and like having a social occasion. So they want to like share some stories, and they want to share nice conversation and more. And where we come in is we're the ones who supply the story behind the wine that they're sharing and enjoying with food. And so it's both that psychographic alignment and the demographic alignment that me and my team are always looking for.
Can we go behind, as before we go deeper in the podcast, can we understand you? Who is Lisa? Your background? Where did you grow up? More
Sure.
about you personally.
I was
Sure.
about to come to your favorite micro meal, with which your favorite meal to go with the wine.
Oh, I couldn't do my favorite microwave meal because I've stopped microwaving meals when I was at university. But my favorite meal is one that I'm sharing with my kids and my husband. In California now, we have dinner together every day. Last night was taco night. Like, we've introduced our kids to Mexican food because we have the privilege of living in California. And my God, they're obsessed. Like, my daughter said at one stage during taco night last night, she was like, "Mummy, there's no guacamole." And I was like, "Oh dear, what a devastating situation to have." And I quickly like went and made some. But I'm Lisa. I have been in e-commerce and consumer marketing now for 20 years. I actually had the privilege of growing up moving around, which is something that my kids are now experiencing too. So I grew up in the UK, in Belgium, in Switzerland. We moved around for my dad's job. He was a CFO for a big American pharmaceutical company. And I've had a sort of a jumpy career, a career that has allowed me to kind of use both the left and right side of my brains. And I've always been comfortable in roles where both of those things are needed. And so I started off in management consultancy, but then moved into like the heartbeat of creativity, which is an advertising agency. I've then been in client side roles, as it were, since then, knowing that actually being in control of the money and in the direction that you're going is something that I enjoy. And so then I've spent the last 10 years in leadership roles in e-commerce companies. And Ocado, which is one of the stories I'm sure we'll get onto, was a real proving ground for me, but it's Britain's biggest online-only supermarket. It's actually the world's biggest online-only supermarket, but was a good natural fit on from Deliveroo, which is a classic sort of American DoorDash style food delivery company. So in essence, I like delivering nice meals and food and wine to people's houses. That's kind of how I boiled down the last 10 years.
And you know what, Lisa? Coincidentally, one of the biggest whiskey brands and rum brands in India is called McDowell's.
Is it?
Yep. By
Also, McDowell's was the burger chain in Coming to America, you know, that like classic American movie. So yeah, I've had various connections to McDowell's over the years.
And Lisa, what's the story behind the name of the brand, Naked Wines? It sounds very provocative, I like it, but what's the story behind it?
Yeah, it's a polarizing one, actually. We find it both great from a memorability perspective, right? Like you see naked on things and you're like, oh, that is kind of memorable. But it also makes things in search browsers quite hard to navigate. Sometimes you get blocked for the wrong reasons. So the story behind Naked is we are intending to strip out the middleman between wine, to remove the bullshit from the wine industry, to, excuse my French there on the podcast. And whilst we can get mistaken for being organic or it being just about natural wines, it's something much broader than that, which is wine, especially now in a period of contraction, in a period of, you would probably say, crisis in the wine industry, it's always been a little bit elitist. It's always had its own language and its own customs. And a lot of people find that quite hard to relate to. And so at Naked, when we were founded by our founder, Rowan Gormley, he set out to make sure that we were something different, that we were a business that could connect you to the real stories behind wine, right? Ultimately, it's an agricultural product, right? It's about how you work a piece of land. And instead of getting caught in mouthfeel and texture, let's talk about real people. Let's talk about, like, this is my friend Anna. So she was in the winery yesterday. We were having a good old chat about how this photo was taken 10 years ago. But like, Anna's this amazing Portuguese winemaker who now lives in California, but she makes Portuguese style wines for us. And she's this badass woman in the wine industry who our customers, like, they know and love her wines. Like, I was pouring her wines at a film festival 2 weeks ago in Sonoma. And people were stopping to talk about the label. And then I got to tell the story about who she is. And they were like, oh, that's fantastic. Like, I'd love to meet her. Taking that and making the wine industry about the people and not about the liquid, that's what we're about. So that's why we're called Naked Wines.
Wonderful. Lisa, you started your career with a master's degree in geography. I love geography. I'm a huge geography nut. And then built a career across strategy, insights, brand, and now growth leadership. So looking back, which phase of your career changed how you see the business world the most, and what did you learn and unlearn?
What did I learn and unlearn? Like, I love that question and that framing. So the steepest learning curve that I had in my career so far was for sure at Ocado. So Ocado is, as I've just mentioned, Britain's biggest online-only supermarket. I was interviewing it 6 weeks into the pandemic. I signed up to take this job having not met anybody face-to-face. And it was the job of a lifetime. The brief from the CEO was to take us from being the smallest supermarket brand in the UK to being an absolute, like, force in our own right. So I got to oversee and lead a full rebrand, master brand level, but also a rebrand for every single element of our own brand food range, which was a pretty significant food range. And we did a rebrand, which would take most companies 2 years. We got it done in about 5 or 6 months. And this was everything from vans and uniforms to what went on the packet of frozen peas. I also got to lead and develop the new acquisition go-to-market strategy. So we'd been very voucher reliant until then. The pandemic changed everything. And we got the privilege of spending a year reworking the foundations of the brand. We didn't need to spend any money on acquisition. We actually had to shut the shop to new customers at one stage because the demand was just so intense. We had to focus on serving our existing customers. So I got a year to figure out what the acquisition strategy was going to look like at the point at which we opened back up after the pandemic. But I also got to spend time on the content side of the business, producing content that people want to spend time with. And me and the team that I had the privilege of working with, we learned loads. In terms of what I had to unlearn, this was why it was the steepest learning curve. The first thing I had to unlearn was working hard wasn't going to cut it anymore. I'd been in roles in the past where I'm pretty bright, I work really hard, and that had been enough to make real progression through companies. And at Ocado, it wasn't enough. At Ocado, like, we were in a razor-thin margin industry. We'd drawn, like many others, a straight line for demand coming out of the pandemic, and it turns out that straight line was a myth. We had to entirely rework the business in 2022, 2023. And I was now a leader across multiple departments and being responsible for really significant commercial results. And so I had to learn leadership and actually to unlearn a bunch of things to learn that leadership. I was lucky enough to have some incredible role models. And the person who springs to mind the most is our CEO, who was this badass New Zealand Kiwi Maori woman, like a woman from an ethnic minority background who had learned the hard way how to lead through really tough environments. And she was a firecracker. She led with energy and with warmth and with, like, real passion for being out in the field. The thing that made her magic at Ocado was she knew all of our forklift truck drivers' first names. She would be out delivering, like, our groceries in our vans before most of us were even awake. Like, she was always at the front line of the business. And so, yeah, I learned a lot of my leadership lessons from her. And then the biggest thing I had to learn is that wielding real influence in a business is not achieving things by force. And previously, I think I'd used force of personality and sort of tenacity to achieve the goals that I'd been set. And here I had to learn how to say no. This is something that, yes, you might want to do, but it's not going to help us achieve our goals. And to say no while still influencing like the strategic direction of business, I got a lot of that wrong. But I think I had to get it wrong to learn how to get it right.
Can you give us a story? What did you get wrong? Or the content that you created? I'm also interested in that, being a content marketer.
So on the content side, we had a magazine at Ocado. It was called Ocado Life. And when I took it over, it was kind of sad and tired, and it didn't really know why it existed. And by the time I left, it was the second most read food magazine in the UK, a physical printed magazine, right? Print is dying still in journalism. But as a brand, we were able to fund it because when we heroed products inside of it, when we heroed new stories and new producers, they sold more. We had tangible evidence that customers who read Ocado Life spent more money with us, stayed for longer, and we ended up putting it in our new customers' orders, like from the very beginning, because we knew that if we got someone engaged and interested in reading the content, in cooking the recipes, we had regular contributors in sort of reading their opinions and perspectives. We always had Nigella. I don't know if you guys know Nigella Lawson, but she was a celebrity that we brought on board to help tell the Ocado story. They wanted to spend time with her and cook like she did. And so the mantra that me and the team always had was, is this something that you pick up and choose to spend time with? Because then it's something that lives in someone's home. They put it on a bookshelf and they come back to it. They find a recipe and they come back to it again and again. And that just is doing the job of brand salience, right? But what I got wrong at the time with Ocado Life was I didn't tell the story internally. And so people saw it primarily as a cost line on a P&L. They did not see the upside because the upside gets hidden in the frequency of the customer or in how much they're spending with you. And so the thing that I learned the hard way, and I had several run-ins with some finance directors over the years, was to make sure that I was able to present the entire picture, even when it was hidden on a P&L.
Interesting. So Lisa, you have built and led insights functions, brand team, and now broader growth function. When someone asks you what you actually do today at Naked Wines, how do you explain it in simple, non-marketing way? Or how do you explain it to your kids, your
Yeah.
family, and to other colleagues you would meet at a conference?
Yeah.
Different people.
I often ask my kids what they think I do because it's funny. And they, when they're telling like their friends or talking to our family, they're like, Mummy works in a nice building. It's a nice building. She has a lot of meetings and she talks a lot about wine. And while that's true, it's not necessarily how I would describe it. I think if you were to ask my boss, who's our CEO, or our board, I'm the person responsible for setting a really ambitious strategy for how we return Naked Wines to sustainable revenue growth. We're in a period of revenue contraction at the moment. That's not new news. Like I say, it's been tough coming out of the pandemic, but I'm the one who's focused on why we exist. We want to make great wine better for everyone. And I have the privilege of leading teams in a really customer-centric, like high-performance way to get us back to sustainable growth. But I don't even think that cuts it, right? Because that's not non-marketing. So how I describe it is Naked Wines is a brilliant business with a badly told story. And I have one of the best jobs in the world because I get to orchestrate the conditions by which we finally tell our story. We get to restore trust in this business, and then we can fulfill our potential as a genuine community-centric brand, which is really relevant in this modern era of like AI slop and lack of authenticity. We want to stand against that.
Interesting. So, going to Naked Wines now, it's a very different kind of business model, funding winemakers upfront, building this angel community, and removing traditional distribution layers. Can you explain this business internally and what's one thing people misunderstand about how it actually works?
It's been really interesting. I've now been 2 years here, learning the business and meeting almost everyone internally now. And internally is not where we have a belief issue. There is full belief internally in this business. We have some really long tenured team members, and they stay because of their belief in our mission. Where we struggle with the belief is out in the real world. So we have over 200 winemakers all over the world. And many of them have tasting rooms or cellar doors or locations where people can go and actually experience, be on the land, where the grapes are grown, where the wine is made. And do you know what the one question that constantly surprises our winemakers when people turn up to their front doors? Our customers ask, is it real? Is the Naked Wines model like really genuine? Do they really commit money up front? Is our money as angels actually being used to support you, the small independent winemaker? And I spend a lot of time with our winemakers, and luckily they're able to really genuinely answer, yes, it's real. They're able to reassure our angels that the money that the angels are paying into their wine piggy bank every month does get used as forward commitments for grapes and for parcels of land and for new wine styles that winemakers are looking to try. And that belief our winemakers have is because without us, they have to do two things that they don't really enjoy. So they'd either have to be working for a huge corporation, making stuff to a recipe with no independence or autonomy, or if they go independent, they then have to take responsibility for selling all the wine that they make. But with us, we take responsibility for the selling. So all we're asking them to do is do their very best work, be the craftspeople that we know them to be, and then they're free to make the best wine and to make the best of the fruit of the region, of the style that they work in. And then we're the ones who bring together wine lovers with those winemakers who genuinely know and trust and respect each other. And so, it's not the belief internally that I struggle with. My job is to build the belief and the trust externally with our customers.
Right. Lisa, earlier you said that at one point, Naked Wines was a good brand with a bad story. So how do you tell a good story? Because you rebranded at Ocado also. So can you share your playbook of telling a good story?
What a question. I do think it's very context dependent. But I always come back to the movies. I was watching, I think there'll be several judgments for this. I was watching Armageddon last night.
Armageddon, I love Bruce Willis, right?
Bruce Willis, Ben Affleck, Liv Tyler, Billy Bob Thornton, iconic movie. I'm obsessed. Yeah.
It's a great movie.
It's a great movie. And I was talking to my husband about it, and I was like, they don't make movies like this anymore, which may not be true. I've just not been to the movies in a while.
No, you're right. You're right. Such star casts are only seen in Avengers and all. So yeah.
Right. So the really simple story. A group of people need to save the world from a really bad thing, giant asteroid, right? And then they go about it, right? There's ups, there's downs, and then there's an ultimate redemption story. Story has to follow classic beats, right? You have to understand what you're fighting for, the future of humanity, or making wine a better way. You have to understand who you're against, giant asteroid, or corporations, supermarkets, people who are squeezing the independent producers out there who are purely looking for better margins. And that means that the thing that you're producing is less sustainable, has less story, is less authentic. And then a group of people who want to go about fixing that. There's a classic story arc, right? There's a mission, there's an enemy, and there's a vision and a goal. And I don't think it has to be any more complicated than Armageddon, ultimately.
Have you read Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, Heroes of 1,000 Faces?
No.
Okay, so it talks about a hero's journey, and it's the classic storytelling structure.
Right.
So you're saying you should just keep to the basics, mission, vision, and the people around you. You should care about them, and that's all.
I mean, there's a probably slightly more nuanced answer, which would be dependent on the channel. It would be dependent on the data. It would be dependent on the context. And sure, we have teams who look at all of that data. I was with our organic social team the other day, and they are deep into the data of what worked brilliantly from all of our organic social content last year. They're now evolving their storytelling methods, having seen what worked. But ultimately, I think it's about real people telling real stories. The more you can do it in video, the better. Wine is a hard product to sell. It looks crap, right? It's a shiny liquid in a glass. There's no emotion there. I sometimes lament not still being in Deliveroo, where you were selling burgers. And burgers capture attention, right? They move across a screen and it triggers something in our lizard brain that is like, ooh, yummy. I should eat that. Wine doesn't do the same thing. And so you have to work harder to tell the story behind it. Now, sometimes working harder allows you to be more creative. And that's where some of the magic and the fun is. But ultimately, yeah, it's the classic hero arc. What's the vision? What's going to get in your way? And then who are the band of brothers and sisters who are going to come together to fix it?
Band of Brothers is again another wonderful
Great
story
movie.
by Phyllo.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you talked about Deliveroo. At Deliveroo, you were building structured customer insight systems across markets and channels. At Naked Wines, the model is more direct, more community driven, more subjective. So, what's been the biggest shift in trusting customer signals for you?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a fair bit in the last year. At Deliveroo, we used to look at NPS and we used to just sometimes double check what was happening on Trustpilot. But because we were a high growth company, because we had product market fit, for most of the time I was there, we were the fastest growing company in the UK. You didn't have to worry too much about the customer insight because the customers voted with their feet. They joined and they came back. At Naked, we don't have that. And I've learned a better approach here. One of our values is to start with our customers. And that is like a stick of rock through this business. You can see at every layer and with every individual, there are people who start with our angels. But there are some things that we do here that I would strongly recommend others to take a look at. So we have Slack. I'm sure lots of companies do. My favorite Slack channel in each country is a Slack channel where our customer service and our social media teams post every single piece of customer feedback they hear that day. So it's some of the busiest channels we have, right? You can have 20, 30 posts in a day. And that feedback is good and bad. And I read every single comment. It often prompts really good debate or swarm from our teams in a single Slack thread where we try and work out how to fix a part of the customer experience that feedback has shown us. The other thing that we do is every month, our service teams host an hour where we listen to calls, and every single person in the company is invited to this meeting. It's my favorite meeting of the month. And the reason for that is we all turn up. Our CEO turns up to every single one of those calls. And we sit there and we listen to the customers who phoned in, to the customers that have had a problem, and we all discuss and debate how we ended up here. What's the root cause issue that we're experiencing? Is this something we knew about or didn't know about? If it's something we didn't know about, what are we going to do about it? And it's absolutely critical that we hear that feedback because it helps us diagnose whether we've got the right focus and the right strategy or whether we need to course correct. And then the other thing that I'm really privileged to get to do in this job is we host loads of events. A winemaker once said to me, and I don't love the phrase, but I love the sentiment, which is it's all about getting liquid on lips. That's what the wine industry is about, right? It's about how you get people to try it. And so we host events. 2 weeks ago, we had one of our original winemakers, Katie Jones, hosting a really small private dinner for her most engaged customers on Naked in London. Every year we run these tours where we bring our winemakers in from all over the world and they come to the UK and they come to Australia and we tour around the country and people pay money in the thousands to come and meet our winemakers. And those tours are magnetic, like you see magic happening where people are engaging and talking to their favourite winemakers. You have people in tears at the tasting tables because they're reconnecting and catching up over years. Like you've got our angels who are coming and they feel like they're meeting old friends because they are. And so I trust now having a blend of customer insight. Yes, NPS matters and Trustpilot score matter, but getting real conversations, getting your teams to hear from real customers, knowing their names, meeting up with them year after year, that's also some really powerful core DNA of this company, and I see how it changes decisions.
I really like how close you are with your angels, because
Yeah.
again we also use Slack at Phyllo here, and to have a channel dedicated to, real time feedback or questions or whatever is coming through. I think socials, emails. What are the channels we're talking about? Other than these, basically events
Social,
also.
email, and the phone,
Yeah,
right?
phone.
People are phoning us up. Yeah. Yeah.
This is so cool. I mean, Akhil, what do you think of this system of getting closer to your clients?
I really like it, and I really like it. And I think one is many businesses, what they've traditionally done is try to do social listening to understand the customer sentiments. But this is more than just social listening. You are also picking up phone data, you're picking up data from more sources like email and in person. What's more important is in person. That's where the not just quantitative, but more qualitative feedback starts flowing in. I think we should also implement this, and
Yeah,
it's a pretty good
but Lisa,
idea.
are you introverted or extroverted? Because Akhil here is introverted. I am fairly extroverted. So do you have to be like fairly people's person to be, like in the middle of the people? How do you manage all that? I'm asking you a personal question here.
So I lean extroverted, but that doesn't mean that I don't have introverted tendencies. And particularly after a long week or a long day, I do need some time to like decompress. I don't believe you need to be one or the other. And I have brilliant leaders in my team, and I see brilliant leaders across Naked who have both tendencies. To me, it's a sort of energy management question. Setting the right boundaries for yourself, being able to maintain your energy and your resilience. Only you know how to do that, and it's not a business's responsibility to help you do it. It's certainly a manager or a coach's responsibility to help you crack it, and it's one of the hardest things to crack, I think, particularly as a woman. But how you manage your own energy matters, because it's a big determining factor of whether you've got the marathon, not a sprint mentality, right? When you're in a business and when you're working in it, when you've got big goals, or in the case of Naked, you're in the middle of a turnaround, you've got to show up every day, and you've got to show up every day with the right energy. And I think anyone can do that, but they've got to know themselves first.
I fully agree. It's about knowing oneself and playing to a personality strength.
Yeah.
Okay, Lisa, uh, when you have to decide which wine to promote, push, or invest behind, what signals you actually look at? Is it customer reviews? Is it repeat behavior, margin, winemaker story? How do you prioritize any of these?
So you're going to get the classic marketing answer from me. Are you ready? It's the two-word answer. It depends. And the reason it depends is every category is different, right? Every product is different. And so what we've learned in wine over the years is there are lots of different factors at play. The first one I'll start with is seasonality. So I don't know if you noticed, but recently rosé has started. So in America, rosé, like wine term searches on our site, they spike in March because the weather gets better and everyone's like, ooh, the sun. Love that, rosé for me. In the UK, rosé spikes just before Easter, and again, it's linked to the weather. And so we can actively see when we need to sort of flip our range when people log onto the site from like the winter range more into that like spring summer range. And I know spring summer is a fashion term, but it absolutely applies in the wine industry too. So we often start with seasonality. We then, beyond seasons, look at occasions, right? Wine is super occasion driven. And so while you might want a sort of tried and trusted bottle that's good value, but like not push the boat out for like a midweek, just dinner with kids, what we often see is that people will mix that wine buying pattern with much more exciting, like we're going to try something new and exciting and push the boat out this weekend. But then the thing that we really look at Naked is which winemaker has a story to tell. And so I'll give you an example. We have a winemaker in the north of England. He actually makes some of the most northerly wines in the country. And he's a former ex-army major. And he also happens to look a lot like a certain Mission Impossible star. So much so that a few years ago, we got him coverage on the BBC for being the Tom Cruise of booze.
Wow.
Trademarks associated with Tom Booze and Tom Cruise stay relevant.
With
But
a
there's
very
a
thick,
headline.
I'm sure.
Sorry?
With a very thick British accent, I'm pretty sure.
Very British
No.
accent. He
Yeah.
looks a lot like Tom. It just really works for the cameras. And he's called Kieran Atkinson. And I've had the privilege of being up to his winemaking facility. It's a shed in Derby. I think it was Derby. Kieran, shout at me if it wasn't in Derby. And he was talking to us a few months ago now, where he was saying, you don't have the right sparkling range in the UK. And sparkling is critical for occasions. It's critical for seasonality. People love to celebrate with it. Like getting that range right matters. And he was like, I'm going to make you a British sparkling wine for under £12. And our head of wine was like, it can't be done. We don't think you can do it. If you can do it, we'll buy it. But we don't think you can do it. And he did it. So he used classic Prosecco making methods, which is big steel tanks. He used British grapes. And we've tasted the wine and it's brilliant. Now, I can't reveal too much more about it because we're keeping it as a surprise for our angels. But we're launching it in British Wine Week, which is in the middle of June. And he'll be on tour this year, which is the big tour that I mentioned, telling all of our angels first about this wine. And so, yes, it's occasion, it's seasonality, but again, it's story. Can we find the right product in a gap, and then do we have a story to tell about it?
Can you tell, you mentioned about British Wine Week. Are these wine events is where you launch the product, or that's where you see the major uptake? Are these the events which are the most important in wine industry, where you see the most uptake? Or
No.
how do people discover new wines?
So it's a great question, and I'm sure traditional wine companies would care a lot about British Wine Week. Because we're a subscription model, we're a closed community, right? You have to pay to join us. And so we use British Wine Week as a way of amplifying a story. And we know that landing this British sparkling wine is really important to do before the big summer season kicks off. But because we've got customers who are in this closed community, we just care that we can get them the wine as quickly as possible, right? We want them to get the benefit of their membership. So we use British Wine Week as an excuse. We'll use Christmas as an excuse. But for the most part, we want to make sure that our customers are seeing new and interesting stuff from us that they can then try themselves. And then they'll vote with their feet, right? We also have, and what's one of the things I love about having a community-driven model is we use our customers to determine the range. So we have a Instagram broadcast channel, right? So it's a channel that only our fans are inside of, but we use it to do MPD. Our head of wine, Toby, was in New Zealand over January, and he was talking to some of our Kiwi winemakers, and they were saying, yeah, Kiwi Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, right? That's the most drunk wine in pretty much the world, right? It's one of the most pervasive wines out of New Zealand. And they were like, we want to make an Alvarinho, which is a classic Spanish varietal. And they were like, but we don't quite know what direction to take it. Should we keep it really traditional, which is kind of bright and zesty, or should we kind of do a different thing with an Alvarinho from New Zealand? And Toby was like, let me just ask our angels. So overnight, he messaged our social media manager. She got a poll out to all of our angels on our Instagram channel, and we had a vote overnight for which direction of style our winemaker should go in. And it was the traditional bright and zesty style. And we were able to give that feedback within 12 hours. That's one of the reasons our winemakers love to work with us, is that when they're trying MPD, they're not doing it in a vacuum. They're not doing it in the dark. They're doing it with 500,000 people voting with their buying power behind it. So yeah, it's just another example of why the model is great.
Right. And just on the subscription side of the business, how does that work? Like if I subscribe to Naked Wine, what would be the subscription fee and what do I get in return?
So there's no fee. You sign up and you just pay a certain amount of money per month. You determine the amount. And it just goes into your wine piggy bank. So I personally pay, I think it's $50 in the US, but I was paying £30 in the UK. And that just goes into your Naked account. And so when you're ready to buy and curate a case for yourself, you just draw down off that money. So no fee, cancel anytime, you can go on a payment holiday anytime, super flexible, but we ask for the monthly commitment because of the model. We need to support our winemakers, and that free flow of cash enables us to support them better.
Got it. Also, here on the business side, every business model has certain risks or certain trade-offs you end up making. In this, because you're providing a lot of support to winemakers, what are the risks that goes from a traditional typical wine business? A typical wine business may have these winemakers or vineyard owners at some risk. What are the trade-offs? What's better about this business model? What's better about the other business models?
So what's better about our business model is some of the things I just described. An access to a group of customers who are your biggest fans, right? You can try new things with them, you can get their opinions, you can build loyal followings over time and a really sustainable revenue source. That's if you're a winemaker. And for us as Naked, we obviously have the responsibility of looking after those angel funds and making sure that we're investing it in the right range. And so I think one of the trade-offs that we've seen, and it's very well documented, is that we haven't necessarily made our inventory decisions with a ton of prudence. And so particularly in the pandemic, because wine, and I find this hard, the one thing I do, I guess, wrestle with in this category is we're a very low frequency purchase because we're 12 bottles. So we probably only get a frequency of an average customer of 3 purchases in a year. You've got a very slow learning loop on 3 purchases a year. At Ocado, some of our best customers were buying twice a week. The learning loop on those customers was nuts, right? You could test new things and learn incredibly quickly. Here, the learning happens much slower. And so one of the downsides of that is you can sometimes be more optimistic about the future sales pathway and therefore the amount of wine you need to buy than the reality. And because wine is made in some instances over 2 or 3 years, we're currently looking at a buy plan where in some instances we're making decisions about how much wine that we'll need for a certain thing, a certain varietal, in 2029. That level of prediction is hard and getting it right is not easy. And so that's a muscle that we're still building today at Naked.
Got it. Lisa, the brand Naked Wines has historically leaned on discounts, but now there's a clear shift toward rebuilding trust and long-term value. What does that repositioning look like in real day-to-day decisions and not just on the messaging side?
God, what a question. So I find this question actually quite hard in terms of how does the repositioning show up day to day? Because I can't really unpick it. It's in every place that me and my team spend time. So I'll give you some examples. We've focused now significantly more on the quality of the customers that we're bringing into the business for the first time, and how well we're keeping those customers and monetizing them. Sorry to talk about it that way, but that's ultimately what we're doing in growth. And we're doing that over thinking about a quantity of customers. In that quality over quantity shift, we have evidence and ways of thinking about it that happens on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis. I'll give you some examples. So we regularly are looking at the predicted lifetime value of our customers. Are they rating their first wines? Are they quickly placing another order? We're consistently assessing the ROI of our marketing investment and reweighting it based on which channels we think are working best for us in that moment. But it also shows up in how we stay focused on keeping our existing customers for longer. So we're making content that they want to spend time with. We're asking them on Instagram what kind of Kiwi Alvarinho they want us to make so that they, when it comes out, are more likely to buy it. And then one of the things that my boss, our CEO, has helped me think much better about is time allocation. Because ultimately that's the biggest, what's the right way of framing it? It's like the most valuable resource that we have aside from our dollars that we have to play with. And that time, as we've moved into our new financial year, which we're 3 weeks into now, we've removed a ton of meetings from everyone's diaries. We almost started the year with our CEO. He basically said, take everything out of your diary that isn't mission critical. Because we want to free up people's time so that they're not reporting the weather or they're not in meetings that they don't feel that they should be in. And instead, they're focused on where they can add value. And I'll give you an example. Because our CEO has freed up so much of his own time, he's now come to me to say, hey, you know that brand council that you chair? I want to be in it. He's voting with his feet to say, our cross-functional group who come together from all over the world, who are tasked with building this brand, building the trust in the Naked brand, delivering brilliant creative campaigns, brilliant design that reflects our mission, planning how our community-centric offerings, our events are happening. He wants to be in that meeting. And how brilliant is that there's a CEO in this business who doesn't just understand how valuable building this brand will be over time and how much of a moat it's going to create for us, but he's voting with his the most precious thing that he has, which is his time. And so that's a good example, I think, of when it comes to being focused on brand, yes, you've got to be in the details, you've got to be in the tactics, you've got to be in the active investment decision making, but you also have to be prioritizing it with your time. And ideally that goes all the way to the top of the organization.
So, in summary, mission critical internal meetings only, and being close to the voice of the customers. It can be a forum, it can be a community that is going on, and all the channels that you're listening them from. And I'm glad that you mentioned your CEO is very close to this overall market that you have in 3 countries. So you operate across US, UK, and Australia.
That's right.
3 very different wine markets. So I'm particularly interested to know more about Australia on that front. What are the biggest differences you've noticed in how customers behave across these 3 markets?
I know you've asked about the differences, but I'm gonna answer it in the opposite. There are many more characteristics that unite our customers than that divide them. So I've spent time, and I'm privileged to do so, right, but with our angels in all 3 markets, and they all care about our mission. We regularly do a survey that I think is really cool. Naked was the first time I'd seen this type of survey done, where we ask customers, how disappointed would you be if Naked no longer existed, right? That's a really fascinating question. So we ask them how disappointed they are, and then we only look at the answers of those who say that they would be very disappointed. And we use those answers to work out, what is it about our DNA? What is it about the experience of being a naked angel that you love? And I use the word love very intentionally, which is that we have some unbelievably high NPS scores. We have really high retention levels. And so how I can help us find more customers like that really matters. And so using that question, how disappointed would you be if we no longer existed, really gives us some good signal. And so those customers, they want to drink great wine, but they want to do it whilst doing good in the world. And supporting local independent winemakers who are close to the land, who are close to the community, who are all incredible members of like their local industry. I'll give you some examples. In January this year, some absolutely huge bushfires like ravaged southeastern Australia. 2 of our winemakers, actually 3 of our winemakers were very closely affected. One is called Sam Plunkett. Sam had a heartbreaking experience. So fires ravaged his property. He's on a big sheep farm that also has vines in it. And overnight, the fires came through, decimated his land. And people showed up the next day, and they showed up with bullets. And the reason people show up with bullets in rural Australia is when a fire goes through your property, the kindest thing you can do for your livestock is to shoot them where they are rather than let them die slowly. And so at this point, Sam needed 8, 9, 10,000 bullets to help his livestock pass peacefully. And so when I say our wine members are upstanding members of their community, you can tell that when people are volunteering their time and arriving at Sam's doorstep to help him do some of the hardest things that you can do, you get a sense of who our winemakers are. Another of our winemakers, Nina, she's in the same area. She's called Nina Stocker. She is a volunteer firefighter. So she was literally driving some of the fire trucks through the fires to get to people's properties to try and protect them. And so when we heard this story, we told our angels all over the world, because Sam, Nina, and their communities, their wines are in all of our markets. We told our angels, and overnight we had thousands of pounds flooding in of people buying their wines because they knew that we were going to support and share the proceeds and the profits from those wines with Sam and Nina to help them rebuild after that fire had come through. And so I tell that story not to emphasize the horrors of climate change, although they are there and it is real for our winemakers, but to demonstrate that our customers care about supporting local independent winemakers and supporting the communities that they operate in. But as you say, there are differences. So here in the US, there are wildly complicated regulatory and compliance differences by state. So I'm lucky in California in that there's probably the least regulation here, and we can drink wine from anywhere. But I'll give you some examples of some of my colleagues in Colorado. They cannot drink any wine that is imported. So they can't drink Italian Prosecco. There's no French Bordeaux for them. There is no Provence Rosé. And that's because of a sort of historic and complicated approach that the federal and local states have had to alcohol, which emanates from the Prohibition era. And I'm still learning a bunch of this nuance. In Australia, 99% of all the wines that Australians drink is from Australia and New Zealand. And so that really limits our ability to do any kind of range consolidation, which makes the marketing team's job harder, right? Because you've got far more products and SKUs that you're needing to navigate customers' experience of. And then in the UK, in Britain, supermarkets are incredible, right? You get incredible value. They move incredibly fast. And the selection is really pretty good. And so our customers are got very different contexts in each market. But I'll finish where I started, which is I'm grateful that in today's, perma-crisis era, that there's far more that unites our customers than divides them.
Interesting. And Lisa, how does the P&L of this business look like? And feel free to ignore this answer, but is it you're buying from the winemaker, so you pay a winemaker something, and then you sell it at some premium price? So let's say if you're buying at $100 and you're selling at some $200 or $300. Is that a correct way to explain this business? And what your core USP you're adding is marketing and distribution?
Ask me the last portion of that question again.
The core value proposition you are adding in the business is around marketing and distribution?
Yeah, at a high level, you're correct, right? We buy the wine from our winemakers. In some instances, we actually buy grapes and then we come together with our winemakers, particularly here in Sonoma, in the heart of wine country. We buy the grapes and then we make the wine together with our winemakers because we're a working winery. To be a D2C player in the US, you have to make the wine. And so there is nuance by country. But for the most part, yeah, we have cost of goods, right? We have to buy the wine and then we sell it on to our customers and then we act as the marketplace or the aggregator. So yes, a lot of it is the marketing and the storytelling, but I think that's the fun bit.
Got it. So Naked Wine, in a way, is a marketplace for wines.
A closed marketplace, though, so that kind of makes it more complicated.
Got it. Yeah. Fine. So there's been a lot of conversation that has been happening around premiumization of wine, but also changing consumption pattern with younger audience. What are you actually seeing versus what industry thinks it's happening? And a lot of new young Gen Z have stopped drinking. They are going no alcohol sort of thing.
Yeah, they are. Look, it is not a good time to be in the wine industry. I work in and around Napa. There are sounds of alarm on an almost daily basis here. There's a lot of consolidation. There are a lot of people losing their jobs. It doesn't help that tourism to the US and to this area has been really affected more recently. But we're lucky in that we are fairly well insulated from some of those big external shocks. So yes, there's structural market shifts. Yes, there's pressures on tariffs. I'll give you the example. In California, our biggest export market used to be Canada. It's not Canada anymore. Canada is no longer buying any US wine. They're not no longer buying it. They literally took the wine off the shelves that they already had in the country and they've put it in storage. So there are some really huge structural changes happening inside of the industry. Inflation is a huge example, and we are already in our business starting to see the shock come in from the Middle East crisis and the fuel crisis that we're about to experience. So the industry is in a tricky place. There's also a lot of hand-wringing, as you say, about Gen Z. And the thing that I feel grateful for is that Naked, we're focused elsewhere. So whilst the industry is focused on Gen Z, because they see that as a source of future growth, I need our business to focus on Gen X. And no one talks about Gen X anymore, right? When did you last hear anyone say anything about the generation that came after the boomers? But Gen X is where it's at for us. So your average 45-year-old who is probably in a decent job and who probably needs to chill out over the weekend and to open a glass of wine, that's who we're focused on. They're upper middle income parents. They're stuck at home because they've got teenagers who can't drive yet. And they want to drink better wine while doing good things. And ultimately, that's better than getting some rubbish from the corner shop or from the local supermarket. So yes, there's a lot happening in the industry. Yes, there's some concern happening for Gen Z, but I need me and my team to stay focused where it matters, which is on making sure that our Gen X angels have a really good experience with Naked.
It's interesting, Lisa, that you did not even mention millennials. Do you think millennials are struggling to find their place in the society right now? They are, not there yet, like Gen Xers.
I'm a millennial. And so I find it hard to answer the question, when you're inside of a customer cohort. We do care about millennials, right? Millennials will be the next biggest focus area for us. And recent data has come out to say that they're actually now the biggest consumers of wine of any customer demographic by volume. And so we know that that's an important audience. And yeah, I do worry for millennials, right? Like we were born and raised to work really hard to set our sights on something and that we'll get it. And I don't think that's true in today's perma-crisis era. And I could definitely spend some time doing a big worry about that, but I try and stay focused on the things that I can control, which is how does this business show up in the world for our customers? And so, yeah, I stay focused there.
Cool. You worked in environments with very structured data systems, and now one where behavior, sentiment, community all play a role. What's your actual workflow for separating signal from the data noise?
So I think I'll put my hand up at this point and say, this is not one of Naked's strengths. And that's partly on me as a leader of this business, right? So we're still working on this. I think one of the keys to having a highly aligned organization pushing in the right direction is consistency. And we have consistency in the North Stars that we focus on. So in our business, we are focused on making sure that we've got the right amount of cash and profitability. We make sure that we've got the right payback levels on our acquisition side, so the right kinds of customer acquisition costs and the right LTV of our customers. We remain really focused on our winemakers and what their experience of working with us is like, and we've got a rigorous system for how we do that. And then we're really focused on the employee experience. What are our current engagement levels like? Are we keeping the right employees and are we keeping them for the right reasons? And so those sort of 5 North Stars, those are where we stay focused, and they've been the same North Stars for the last 2 years. They'll be the same North Stars for the next 2 years. Our bonuses are linked to them. Everyone in the company is included. Those North Stars have been consistent. Where we struggle is the leading indicators. I've said already, our frequency is super low, and so our ability to learn quickly is really limited. And so setting the right leading indicator has been something that we've really struggled with. And actually, I need some advice on it. We either tend to set an aspirational KPI that we don't track today, and then we get caught up in working out how to track it and forget that actually we have to move the KPI. Or we pick a KPI that we've always tracked, but the problem with that KPI is it never moves. And you can't tell if it's moving because it's a super sort of slow moving metric. Frequency is a great example, or AOV is a great example, which is they don't move that often. And so you don't know if you're having the right cause and effect inside of the business. So yeah, I'll put my hand up and say, I need to do more work here and do better here at helping this business set the right leading indicators.
And is this similar across other wine industry also, or alcohol in general, or
I have no idea.
Low frequency? Okay.
I have no idea. I've never worked in any other wine company. What I will say is that it wasn't true in grocery, and it certainly wasn't true at Deliveroo. Our leading indicators in those businesses were clear, they were obvious, and we could point that they were moving in the right direction. So I would say it's something that is a particular challenge in a low frequency business like this one.
Got it. So you've spent your career near insights and decision making. What's an example of a team having a lot of data but still not having a clear point of view? What do you think about that?
Oh, a lot of data, but not a clear point of view. Oh, the thing I'll go to is attribution. I don't know how close you guys are to marketing attribution and the trials and tribulations of it, but I'll give you some examples. We have 5 different ways of giving credit to different marketing channels today for the impact they bring to this business. That's 5 different ways per channel. You're then managing 3 countries. You're then managing those channels on a daily, a weekly, a monthly horizon. Now we've got 5 ways of measuring it in 3 different countries on a daily basis. Can you imagine the level of like data overwhelm that puts on our teams? Like, to say that our acquisition business, like side of the business, has been the most pressured is probably an understatement in this business in the last year. It has been the area with the most heat and the most pressure. And we have teams who have to sort the signal from the noise. And in attribution, we've been trained, right, to understand and trust last click. Google and Meta want us to believe that the traffic that they're sending us is brilliant, right? Because they get direct shareholder benefit from doing that. But that's like saying, let's use Armageddon again as an example. I want to go and see, let's pretend we're back in was it the 90s? I'm guessing it was the 90s. Let's pretend it's back in the 90s. I've heard about Armageddon through the PR tour. I like it because I know that I like Ben Affleck's movies. The way that we're currently measuring marketing still is giving credit to the billboard that you saw as you walk into the movie theatre. That's not credit. That's not fair. And so attribution for me is just, it's both the area that I spend probably some of the most time in with my team, but it also is an area of marketing that is just broken. And anybody trusting a single data source is on a hiding to nowhere, because you have to be able to triangulate the truth from multiple different places. Do the how did you hear about us survey. Look at last click when it comes to marketing in-day budget allocation, but don't do it for annual budget allocation. Make sure that you're doing geographic holdouts, right? Just like in pharmaceuticals where they do placebo studies, placebo study your channels, right? Put money into one place, hold the money from another place, and watch what happens to both. And the delta, that's the truth. The delta is the truth. It's not what happened and where you spent the money and that being the absolute truth. So yeah, attribution to me has been a long-standing issue in the marketing industry. And it's a credit to the quality of the talent we have in our acquisition and our creative and our referral teams that they haven't lost their minds in the last 2 years because of how they've had to work with the amount of data noise with very limited signal.
And some of these independent providers, one is like Meta, Google, they have their own incentive. One works on multi-touch attribution, one works on last touch attribution. But they are independent providers of attribution services. Companies like Nielsen has a media measurement service, some of these companies. How useful are these?
Very. So I've taken the same media mix modeling provider to my last 3 companies. And they're a sophisticated small shop that just do advanced econometric analysis. And econometric analysis is super valuable, right? You get a really zoomed out view that only looks at the statistical correlative analysis between the money that you spend by channel by day and the signups that you get in those periods. But you can't do it every day. And again, you can't trust it 100% because all attribution systems are ultimately wrong. So you should use econometric analysis, and we look at it every 6 months, maybe every year, but we don't use it more frequently. So we use it for budget allocation, but then we need far more monthly and weekly signals, which come from other sources, than our econometric study can give us. And so again, it's about, we call it quadrangulation internally, because we're drawing from 4 different sources at any one time to make sure that our budgets are going to the right places.
Nice. So you have some really, heavy words and difficult to speak. So I think the audience will discount us. Quadrangulation. Wow. Okay.
Quadrangulation. I mean, that's not a real word. Don't get me. Like, I made this up. When I presented quadrangulation to our board, they were like, this isn't a word, right? No. But it speaks to the challenge, right? Which is that you have to pull all of the insights together. And ultimately, this is an art. The decision-making here is an art. You cannot rely on the science. You need some gut instinct and you need some good data. But ultimately, it comes down to the combination of the science and the magic of marketing and how you bring those 2 things together.
Wonderfully said. Lisa, are you planning to write a book? Because I've been noting down the phrases that you've been using and, the lines that you're giving. Are you planning something like that?
No, certainly not. I'm too busy setting the ambitious agenda for how we return Naked to sustainable growth. I don't think I'd have the patience for a book.
You said decision making is an art. If you think about the decision quality inside a growth team, what's the biggest bottleneck today? Access to data, trust in data, interpretation of data, or alignment, as you said, quadrangulation. What seems to be the bottleneck?
You're going to get that marketing answer from me again. You're going to get the it depends answer. And the reason I'll say it depends to that question is the answer would vary really significantly between the different teams that I have the privilege to look after. So our creative team would say they don't have the right access to the data because whilst they produce the assets, they aren't running the channels. Our acquisition team would say trust in the data, right? Trust in attribution data. We've just talked about it. But until they marketing gods give us an attribution system that works, they're going to say they don't trust the data that they have today. So instead, when I think about data, our biggest bottleneck is actually upstream. It's which decisions do we take for which elements of the customer journey to improve. So before you even measure the impact of the improvement, you have to decide where you're going to improve. And the reality at Naked is we've been in business for 15 years. So that means that we have been building code on top of legacy systems for a long time. And our chief digital officer today calls it like spaghetti junction. Our code base is complex and it's rigid and it doesn't allow for change easily or quickly. And so where we actually have some of the biggest sort of bottleneck or challenging type conversations is how and where do we focus on the customer experience? Our bandwidth to change it is so minimal that small changes to that user journey can sometimes take months. And so choosing which bits to change, that typically is where some of the decision quality matters. And then how you measure it is actually the easier part of it. It's where do we focus on what we change that is the biggest source of, I guess, debate inside the business today.
That's interesting. But by the way, I really like that. I wanted to say that I like the word quad. What was the word?
Quadrangulation.
Quadrangulation. I'm gonna use it a lot more. I
Great.
know there's so much data that comes in, and then there's so many times you're making decisions, and it's hard to explain anyone. So
Yeah,
that's a
you're not
great
just
word.
triangulating. Triangulating's easy. That's just 3 data sources. Quadrangulation is where it's at.
Yeah, and then there are more accesses that could be added.
Exactly.
Santa, etc. Okay, so if a new growth leader joined Naked Wines tomorrow, what's the first thing you tell them not to do with the data in their first 30 days? Or let's say first
The
60
first
days.
thing I tell them not to do with the data, I think it would depend on the role and the topic. Did you see that? It depends answer came out again. To me, the absolute joy of being in a new role is you get to ask why, and you can do it across a million places, and it doesn't piss anyone off, right? Being able to ask why really matters. And I actually read a brilliant LinkedIn article from the old CMO of Coca-Cola yesterday. And he was like, when you stop asking why inside of an organization, you need to start thinking about handing in your resignation. And it really stuck with me because why we shouldn't let tenure inside of a business or the fact that our handprints and footprints are now all over the business to be enough of a reason why you stop pushing for change and you stop asking why. And so my advice to anyone new who joins Naked, and we've had a few really fantastic new hires come into the business recently, your first 30 days is understand your role. Work out how you contribute to the strategy and build those foundational relationships, particularly at a senior level, so that you know who you're going to have to partner with to get the job done. Data can come next. That's my view.
Wonderful. Lisa, last one. When you step away from growth metrics, customer dashboards, and the stories of your, vineyards, what's been keeping you curious lately outside of work? And one of my personal questions, did you watch Project Hail Mary?
What's Project Hail Mary?
My God,
Okay, I had the same reaction. Yes, thankfully.
The moon thing.
No, it's a new movie.
Ryan
Uh,
Gosling film.
Oh, with Ryan Gosling. No, I listened to a great podcast called The Rest is Entertainment, and they have been raving about that movie. But like I say, kids, busy job. Don't have time for the movies, sadly, unless I'm like,
okay.
watching it on Netflix later.
I feel I'm not the only millennial who said that. I
Yeah,
feel so better now.
yeah. What keeps me curious outside of work? So me and my family recently relocated to California 6 months ago now, to help us focus on US growth for Naked. Um, and I feel like I've come into my own in California. You could ask my school friends this, I've been middle-aged since I was about 12. And so now I'm like truly inhabiting middle age. So there's a lot of sun. I'm actually looking out the window now and the sun is just coming up over the horizon. So I've taken up vegetable gardening, which is not something you used to be able to do in North London. So we got a plot in our local community garden. We actually went there on the second day that we moved here because we just wanted to like get outside and go see the chickens and like meet some members of the community. And it was incredible. Like this group of gardeners just folded us into their world. Our kids go and they like run around and they have like races on the wheelbarrows, and we volunteered a lot of our time. And that volunteering, we went and did litter cleanups and all the rest of it. It got us a plot, which is a very coveted thing in the local community. They were like, "How did you get a plot when you've only been here for 6 months?" And I said, "Well, we volunteered a lot. We swept a lot of pathways. We dug a lot of holes." And so now me and my kids each have a different bed in our plot, and we're having a competition for who can grow the most vegetables. So I'm currently trying to nail tomatoes, zucchini, which is courgettes for most British customers, and radishes. And my daughter has got a real strawberry situation going on. And so, yeah, it's growth, but it's a different kind of growth, and you get your hands a bit dirtier than when you're typing on the laptop.
And how difficult is it to move countries at this particular age with two kids?
Don't get me wrong, it was challenging. There were some nights that me and my husband, I'd wrap up working at 9 o'clock and I'd then do some of the worst weeks, I'd then do 3 hours of admin on top of it, particularly when we were doing the US visa application. But I moved around countries as a kid. And in today's environment, I have no idea what jobs are going to be available for my kids when they grow up. But the couple of things that I will want them to have to best go about living life in this perma-crisis world is confidence and resilience. And I learned confidence and resilience as a kid by being hoiked up every 3 years and moving country, because you learn to trust yourself, you learn that you're adaptable, you learn that when so much of your context shifts from one day to the next, you learn that you're adaptable and that you can manage anything. And so whilst, yes, there were some challenges, I was moving for the right reason, right? Which is I work for a mission-driven company, a mission I deeply believe in. And I believe we're going to be better able to achieve that mission with me leading the charge for growth in the US than by doing anything else. And then I've got a really supportive family and husband who was fully committed as well. And so it's been an absolute privilege.
How big are these markets? Like, how big is US as a market versus UK versus Australia? One is overall as a wine industry or for naked wine?
So we look at it based on the number of people in our target audience who are available in those countries. We've got some pretty good data analysis that backs this up. The US is 3 times the size on an audience basis. Our profit margin in the US is also twice that of either of the other 2 countries. And so when you look at the total audience and the potential profit margin, the US is by far and away the country with the greatest potential. But it's also the most difficult country to crack, right? The biggest country, the most regulation, and arguably the most competition, because I'm in wine country. If you want an authentic wine experience, you don't go to a website, you go to the winery next door and you talk to the makers and you talk to the owners. So the US is by far the biggest market. That is not to say that the UK and Australia don't matter as markets for us. They do hugely. And both of those markets have got brilliant teams inside of them who are doing some great things. But yeah, the potential for growth is predominantly for us in the US.
Lisa, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Your confidence, storytelling, insights, I think there is a lot to unpack and take it from this episode. Thank you so much once again, and all the best to you and Naked Wines. Any last words that we didn't ask you and you wanted to talk about? Now's the time.
No, I wanted to say thank you for having me. And if I can spread the word quadrangulation to any more places in the world, and if anyone hears it and can help us fix marketing attribution, I'm all ears.
Wonderful. Thank you once again. And thanks to our viewers for sticking with us. We'll be, coming up again with another episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good day.